Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/IDontWorkHereLady, where Karens mistake regular customers as employees and they demand to be served. And in this episode, Karens are going wild yet again. OP shares a story where he and his friends are attacked by a random Karen guys who won't take no for an answer. I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. So a couple of years ago, I was working for a theme park as a live entertainment support tech. This particular story takes place on my second day of work, after returning from a 4-year hiatus. We were all working hard to get the summer show up on its feet, so we took a longer break than normal. It was low-level staff like myself and department supervisors. We were at a pizza place across the street. Now, the way we dressed for this position was fairly distinctive amongst our staff, but I guess less so when you leave the park. We wear blacks, all black clothing down to socks and undershirts, and some stickers even suggest that you wear black underwear. The black shirts we had, as well as the ball caps that several of us were wearing, all had the name of the theme park and entertainment in silver, in less than missable font. On top of which, we had name tags with the company logo and our tool belts on our hips. The pizza place had short black sleeve polos for managers or t-shirts, and though it was a similar black theme, they were not at all alike. So I'm making my way through the buffet, grabbing pizza and some salad, when I hear it, the impatient shriek of, "Excuse me?" Now, I'm focused on my lunch, as we're still on a time crunch after all. So naturally, I assume this woman wanted me to step aside, so I politely moved. I then hear a distinct huff, and then felt a not too gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned around, confused, and said, "Can I?" And that's when the woman interrupts me and says, "Finally, I've managed to get someone's attention. All of these tables are absolutely filthy, and I want you to clean one for me." At that, I blinked for a moment, about to utter the words you all expect. I got as far as, "I don't," when the woman interrupts me again and says, "I know you're on lunch break, but you can stuff your face in a while. You have a paying customer here with no place to sit. Am I supposed to eat standing like an animal?" And yes, the woman actually said that. That's when I point to the logo on my work shirt, and she doesn't even look. But nonetheless, I say to her, "I'm sorry, I can't clean your table for you. Maybe there's someone at the register and they can..." The woman stops me again and says, "Well, you are right here, right now. Why should I have to wait for someone else to do your job?" At this point, I just sigh and begin to walk off, and that's when Karen screams, "I want to talk to your manager." As it so happens, guess who was sitting at the table with our staff? And suddenly, I get an idea. I flag my manager over, and my manager says, "Hey, what's going on?" I say to her, "This woman said that she wanted to speak to my manager." My manager asked, "Why would she?" Karen chimes in and says, "This lazy sack of crap isn't doing her job. I want you to tell her to clean me a table, now." My manager says to Karen, she doesn't work for the pizza place, neither do I." And that's when Karen loses it and says, "What the F is wrong with people these days? No one ever gives good service anymore. You're all useless." That's when my manager went off on Karen. Now, she didn't yell. She was very controlled to the point that it was scary. I wish I could remember exactly what she said, but I had wandered out of earshot after she told me to take my food and sit down. All I know is Karen finally seemed to get the message. And here's the best part. I don't know exactly why, but Karen left without ever eating a single slice of pizza she paid for. My manager ended up giving me some cash to cover my lunch after all that crap, so thanks, Karen, I guess. Guys, I am so glad OP's manager went off on Karen like that. And being someone who used to work in fast food in their teenager years, I only wish a manager stuck up for me like that. Like, just because you spend $5, Karen, doesn't mean you own the place. A few weeks ago, I went jogging a bit later than I had planned. Because it gets dark out so early now, I've recently felt it doesn't matter if I go at 6 p.m. or 9 p.m. because either way, it'll be pitch black dark. I typically jog at the local high school track if I'm going out at night because it's well maintained and has floodlights. The night I went jogging, it was pretty chilly, so I was the only person present at the facility when I arrived. While I was jogging, another car pulls into the parking lot and it idled for a while. I didn't really pay attention. I was focused on my run and some intermittent stretches for joint pain that I've been trying to keep in check. Eventually, another car pulls up as well. and shortly thereafter, I heard some commotion. It was far enough away that I couldn't make out exactly what was being said, but some parts were loud enough that I made out a conversation to the effect of, "They've got someone out here, we've gotta go." Someone followed up with, "No way she works here." Now, I wasn't really listening because it's hard to hear, and I figured it didn't concern me. That's when a young man in a brightly colored hoodie that you couldn't miss leans over the chain link fence around the track and calls out, "Yo, grandma," which I ignored. You don't get my attention by addressing me that way. Eventually, though, he starts waving his arms, and he looked reasonably young, so I thought he might require some kind of assistance, maybe car trouble or something of that nature. He then changed his tune, now calling, "Ma'am, hey ma'am, excuse me." So I approached from a safe distance and asked what he wanted. The young man said, "What are you doing? Do you work here? Are you a teacher or something?" I told him no. Now, I actually am a teacher, just not at the high school. He then said to me, "Oh, so you're just exercising then?" I just nodded, and he replied, "Okay, alright, how long are you planning on staying then?" I told him maybe another 20 minutes, and he said that would be fine. He didn't mean to rush me, he was just trying to get a sense of things. Now, I thought that was really odd, but I didn't want to walk right to my car, thinking of the earlier commotion, just in case something was brewing in the parking lot. I was going much slower now, in order to overhear what was being said in the lot to determine the best course of action. And that's when I heard one of the boys say, "No way, she doesn't even care. She's not even with the school. She wasn't even looking over here until you went over there." I can hear the boy in the bright hoodie responding, "20 minutes. What if it was your grandma? Would you want her here for this? Effing chill for 20 minutes. I can hear the other boy say that he just wanted to settle it, but the boy in the bright hoodie whom I'd spoken to said something inaudible to him, and he got back in the car. Even though they were planning to stay in their cars for the full 20 minutes, this was obviously all enough for me to decide to cut the workout short. As I was turning onto the street, all the boys rapidly got out of their cars. I headed home, and I didn't really think about it again until a friend who works in administration at the high school called the next day to ask if I was alright. I told her I was fine and asked what the reason for the call was. She said she was just checking in because she knows I run on the track at all hours, and there had been a gang confrontation last night. Unconfirmed reports suggest a drug-related dispute, where a boy had been stabbed. I told her everything I'd seen and asked if she wanted me to give a statement to anyone or something like that. She said she'd let the people handling it know and they'd contact me if necessary. I'm a bit shaken up, and I'll definitely stick to running around the neighborhood for a while. I'm horrified, and I really hope it wasn't the boy I talked to. Guys, I also hope it wasn't the one OP talked to. Not that I ever wish for anyone to be stabbed, because it's of course a sad situation all around. This story is absolutely mind-boggling though. Like, when you think about gangs and gang violence, the word polite is not the first to come to mind. And I never thought that I would read a story where some gang members are polite enough to wait for a grandmotherly-looking woman to finish exercising in order to engage in gang violence. Absolutely wild. So the men in my family have been blessed and cursed with premature aged hair. Whether it's premature balding, graying, or both, we start showing signs of being a mature male in the early teens at our latest. On top of this, I'm a teacher, and I've been told this gives me a very commanding posture when I'm talking to people. I'm explaining this because I've been confused for a manager at most places I work, because people assume the older male is a manager. I also don't work at Lowe's. I've never worked at Lowe's. And in my life, I've probably been to this Lowe's like 5 times. Anyways, I'm currently at Lowe's in search of items to build a pet project of mine. As I'm discussing things with an employee, I'm steadily gaining more and more Lowe's employees around me, as they ask each other for different experiences. About 5 minutes go by, and while they do their best to assist me, we finally get to the point that their idea well has run dry. Eventually, I realize that they don't feel comfortable leaving without me giving them permission to go away. So I say, "Thank you for your help, guys. I think I've gotten everything I need from you. Now I'll have to make some of my own decisions." With that, they relax and disappear into various parts of the store like the chained phantoms they are. And that's when I hear, "Finally!" And that's when I turn to see an irate woman who was a haircut away from being a photographic example of a Karen. Now, before I can say anything, this woman comes towards me in a huff, literally dragging one of the store employees by his sleeve. This poor, college-age boy, who probably thought that a job at Lowe's wouldn't add to his stress level when going to college, gives me the look of someone who thinks that he's about to be executed. Now, I don't know what that woman said to him, but he was clearly reconsidering all of his life choices up to this point. The Karen pulls him up to me and says, "Sir, I want you to know that your employee has been disrespectful and completely incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing." Hearing her say that, this caused an aha moment for both myself and the employee. Now, I thought I had said or done something to annoy this woman, and she was going to complain about me to the nearest employee. Meanwhile, the employee thought that she was bringing him to her husband to get a secondary tongue lashing. The employee says, ma'am. But before he continued, I raised my finger at him and gave him the same face that I give my students when we both know they're being stupid. I then say, "You will have your time to talk in a moment. I'll handle this for now." I then turned to Karen and said, "I'm sorry you had a bad time, ma'am. I'll handle the situation from here. If you need further assistance, please feel free to go up to the front desk and explain your needs to them. They'll get you some further assistance." Hearing me say that, Karen says, "Finally," practically preening on the fact that she's ruined someone's day. She then marches out of the aisle the three of us were occupying, and I wait until she turns the corner before looking at the employee. I then say, "We both know that I don't work here, right?" The kid nods, unsure of what's gonna happen. I then shake my head and roll my eyes and said, "Welcome to retail. Take a small 5-minute break and hopefully she'll be gone before you're back on the floor." I then give him a grin and said, "That's an order from your manager." And at that, I could see the weight disappear from his shoulders and he takes a deep breath. I then ask him, "Half-inch PVC pipe?" having forgotten where I was instructed to go from the last conversation I had. The kid says, "2 aisles that way." I say thanks, before walking away and hoping I left the employee with a slightly better day. Guys, OP handled that conflict quite well, but also I expect nothing less from a teacher. And in my opinion, OP should have banned her from the store while he was at it. I would have been like, "I don't care how crappy he is, ma'am. We do not put hands on anyone. Get out." Here's some background. I used to be an hourly manager for Walmart. I worked nights and I had the typical Walmart people incidents. The company underwent a lot of changes and promotion was looking grim, so I left on good terms with the store manager. I still live close by to my old store. I needed to grab a few things before taking my family to dinner. It was also Father's Day, so I had khakis and a blue button-up on. I happened to bump into my former store manager and we caught up for a bit. We had been talking close to the registers as we parted, and that's when Karen comes screeching at me. I looked at my former boss and he grinned and nodded. Karen says to me, "Your cashier has verbally assaulted me and humiliated me in front of all those customers." She then points to a cashier. As a side note, I do know this cashier. I hired and trained her. She's also babysat for me on several occasions, and I'm good friends with her family. I say to Karen, "Slow down, ma'am. Please start from the beginning." Karen goes on and says, "That bitch told me my money is no good here. She would not run my card and she called me trash. I demand compensation." Me, seeing that this is a scam for free stuff, say, "Well, please come with me and security can take a statement. I'm sure they can pull the footage from the register while you fill it out." I then begin heading towards the security office and she begins to follow. But at the mention of register footage, she stops cold and she begins getting louder and more irate. She starts screaming, "I want my items. I want them now." While she's screaming, I recognize the head of security walking our way. I say to her, "I understand, ma'am. Please come with me and this will go quicker." Security stops to talk to the store manager, and I gesture for Karen to follow. We make our way to the security office with store manager and security in tow. Security opens the door and lets Karen in. Inside, the footage is already on the screen, and store manager moves past me into the room. He then says, "Ma'am, we're gonna have to detain you until the police arrive." And Karen says, "I will not wait. I want my things right now. Who are you?" The manager tells her, "I'm the store manager, and apart from you yelling at this customer," gesturing to me, "you have a stolen credit card on you and will wait for police." The store manager then shuts the door and turns back to me and says, "So, when are you coming back?" I just laugh and tell him, as much fun as that sounds, I'm not. I've had my fill of retail. And that's my little revenge on Karen. I never told her I worked there, and I acted as a concerned customer. It turns out the card was stolen and flagged, and she got upset over her stolen card getting declined. Guys, this is one of the most satisfying I Don't Work Here stories I've read in a while. And you know what they say, thieves are not smart. Like, as soon as the card was declined, Karen should have hightailed it out of there. Not making a scene, demanding free things, but we all know entitled Karens, right? Their self-centered arrogance and refusal to see reason gets them in trouble. So Walmart is an amazing place, isn't it? That seems to be the case, as a day ago I found myself in a very peculiar situation. I was poking around an aisle, looking for some baby wipes, diapers, the usual. But I was soon approached by a gangling, gaunt-looking fellow with a yellow shirt that said, "Store work." The guy looks at me and says, "What the F are you doing?" I look at him, and we share a tender, non-verbal moment. And he asked, "What the F are you doing?" At this point, I was sitting there, Tic-Tac idling in my mouth, trying to figure out why Skinny Pete was accosting my taste in Pampers. I managed to finally ask, "What?" He says to me, "Why aren't you at the registers?" And here's where I will admit that I was at fault. I actually did look kind of like an employee without a vest. After a brief moment, I sputter out a meek but to the point, "I'm getting baby wipes." The guy says to me, "Oh, you're getting baby wipes? Is that right? You know who else gets baby wipes? Customers. So go to the register." Again, we shared a 30-second or so exchange of me looking to him, then the basket in my hand, then at my shoes, then back at him, and I said, "I don't think..." The guy interrupts me and says, "I don't care what you think. You shouldn't care what you think." At this point, he gets really close, and I can smell the disapproving pain in his eyes as he spoke in a guttural whisper and says, "Listen, a-hole. Maybe you're new to this, but the Christmas season, you know, the time when we have a crap ton of customers pouring into the store, yeah, that's happening right now. And you're sitting here effing around with your goddamn baby wipes when we have 3 open registers. And maybe you haven't considered this, but other people work here too, and they need help. So get to the register." Now, I had to get home. If I'd had more time, I'd like to think that I would have let him on a bit since I'm a bad person. But I had to make dinner. I say to him, "I don't work here, Joe." And at that, his eyes shot out of his head like cannonballs and his lip whiskers stood on end. He then turned inside out before yelling at me, "You're effing right you don't work here because you are fired. How can you be employed and not want to work?" And then he storms off, shoving a diaper bag on the floor. In all honesty, I do kind of feel bad for the guy. I can totally imagine that he's been having a terrible past couple of days in a terrible undermanned store and he finally snapped. So yeah, I lost my job that I never knew I had. There goes my employee benefits, but hey, at least I got a good laugh out of the ordeal. Yeah, I will never understand how some managers mix up employees that badly, guys. Like, how do you not know who's on the floor? Is there really that many people? And I know the guy's stressed and all, but that's a good way to lose your job. Yelling at an employee is already bad enough, guys, but a customer, oh boy, Karens would be all over that so fast. So I just found this subreddit, and I've been engrossed to the point of anger and amusement by how ridiculous people are. And here's my story. And this is gonna sound completely out there and surreal, but let me just say it was. And it's also very true, which is why I feel for many of you guys. So a few years ago, I was shopping at the mart that sells walls with my significant other and his best friend. We were walking by the registers with the shopping carts when this very loud and unhinged guy walks past us and just screams, "F you." Friend and I looked at each other confused and looked at the guy. The guy had a cell phone up to his ear, so we just chuckled at the misunderstanding. That was the first mistake. Now this part is where people find hard to believe, and all I can say is I'm pretty sure drugs were involved. Our area is known for a meth problem. We had made our way across the store and we're looking at small appliances when crazy drug man approaches us, and the guy had crazy eyes. He then screams at us and says, "Who the F are you to laugh at me? F you, you effing workers. You're all a-holes." My friend says, "Excuse me? What's your problem? We don't work here." The crazy guy continues the same swearing and he says, "I don't like it when people laugh at me." I say to him, I think you're mistaken, we weren't laughing at you and we don't work. The crazy guy then looks at my friend and says, you need to shut her up before I do. And at that, I'm getting seriously angry. My boyfriend's observing the situation, and he starts to interject. But I interrupt by making another mistake that in all honesty, I'm not upset at making, other than what happens after. I say to him, seriously, you need to run along, little man. Now I know this is insulting, which is what I was going for. The guy screams again and says, you need to shut her up. At this point, my boyfriend and I step forward, and his friend steps in front of me, in a way that I think he felt this guy was off the deep end. And the next part happens so fast. The crazy guy then headbutts our friend in the nose, busting it up. Friend doesn't fall, but my boyfriend lunges towards the guy to stop him from doing anything else. And me, being all of 5 feet tall, couldn't do much. The guy then takes off, and a guy watching this called the police and got help. My poor friend was bleeding, and I know my comment didn't help the situation, and I do feel horrible. I took our friend to the hospital and paid for his pain meds. I'm sure the guy was going to act out somehow, so I'm not taking all the fault. They did catch the guy, thank goodness, but not much happened. I would have liked a public flogging, but he was arrested. Oh, the fun one has at Crazy Mart. And this is exactly why you don't entertain someone who you think is not in their right state of mind. Guys, I would have noped out of there so fast. Like, the last thing you'd want to do is engage with a person that looks crazy. And definitely don't tell them to run along, little man. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /IDontWorkHereLady. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I hope you didn't shake your heads too hard. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's in our /Entitled People episode, where a Karen decides to sue over $10 and she embarrasses herself, guys. So go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.